So we did a survey recently. When I say recently, this week, okay, and we sent a survey out to kids who were in lockdown, and we said to them, what would be the number one lesson you would want us to teach you after lockdown with everything that you've seen and experienced? 46%, I looked this morning, 46% said mental health.
Welcome back to The Early Bird. I am very excited to be back today. We are the podcast where we discuss raw, relevant content in an open and relatable way. And today we're going to be discussing a topic that is probably more relevant now than ever before with a social media expert. And he is part of a program called My Social Life. And we're going to be learning about how to utilize our social media presence to grow ourselves and our personal brand, as well as possibly some of the dangers and misconceptions around certain elements of social media. And I think this is a super relevant and informative topic, so I can't wait to dive straight into it. Welcome, Dean. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Ali. Thanks for the time. Very cool.
So I believe you are part of now this program called My Social Life. And just before we start, I just wanted to get sort of an understanding of exactly of how that came to be and what influenced you to possibly go into the space of social media and creating or joining this program online.
Yeah, I have been in the media, so I have owned different media agencies over the last 20 years. So I've owned advertising agencies, PR agencies, strategy agencies. And for the large portion of that time, I've been dealing with the media, with journalists, with how stories are created. And if you think about that, that came over 20 years. But in the last 10 years, actually in the last 13 years, we then got smartphones. And then in 2010, we got tablets. And then what happened was social media really exploded because of those devices. That meant that basically anybody could publish it. So anybody was really in the media, influencers and so on. And when that happened, was a little more complicated because people were publishing stories. There was quite a lot of fake news. There was intimidation and bullying and sexting. And so the devices kind of started to become a little bit out of control because nobody was guiding them as to how to manage their own media consumption and their own media use. And I decided to flip from looking after the reputations of large banks and tech companies into looking after the reputations of teens and pre-teens and helping them to understand that these devices that we use are like amazing, they're insane, but we just need to be careful that we don't trip up and find ourselves in some real hot water that could probably change our mind state, our emotional health, and potentially our reputation.
I think what you touched on, our phones are sort of probably one of the most powerful tools that humans have ever had. And also probably one of the most dangerous but also useful and powerful tools. And I think that it's really amazing to sort of learn how to utilize the good parts and how to stay away from some sections that could possibly have like a negative impact on us. So it's really great to hear that you're doing this and to also sort of get a better understanding of what you do, because I know in schools they sort of touch on it, and the topic of social media is often something that when people hear, they sort of switch off, and people I think feel that it's spoken about too much. But I think that's mostly due to the information that we're given, which is no, don't spend a lot of time on your phone, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, rather than why we shouldn't do this and how we can use it to have a positive impact on ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's totally fair what you're saying. I mean, I would imagine that if I was a teen, I'd feel honestly exactly the same, that you don't want a boring lecture about technology when in many senses you're more advanced than the adults that are also using the same technology. And that's when in our program, that's not what we're here for. So the reason why we're not here for that is because we know full well that I can't persuade you to get off your device. I realize that really early in the growth of what we do. It's that what we want to do is we want to be able to fill your brain with all the information you may need. And then you're going to call upon that information and you're going to make a choice. And sometimes you're going to screw up, like even after you've got the information. And then when you screw up, the second reminder is we're going to say to you, get to choose again. Hopefully, in the instance where you hurt someone or you hurt somebody else, or you had a reputational issue which could really kind of mess with your future. And I promise you've no idea what we see in schools at the moment. It's just insane, that you are able to then choose again, and then hopefully you manage to not harm your reputation or harm somebody else. Because the things that we are seeing, and this is really important, is we are seeing people with mental health issues, crazy stuff like paranoia. We're seeing people with OCD, body dysmorphia, anxiety, depression. And at the same time, I'm also seeing kids who've had their platforms hacked. So they've seen their accounts hacked, that we've got people from the other side of the world running their 1,400 followers or so and saying, and speaking and threatening their sisters and their parents. The problem is that people, kids, teens, they don't realize it can happen because it hasn't happened to you yet. So I totally get that. But what we're trying to do is to put the information into your brain to say to you, hey, look, the best I can do is give you the information. Then you get to choose, because that's life's path, right? Is that you get to choose. And if you think that what I'm talking about is total rubbish, move on. But it'll probably come back and ping you and remind you when you fall into that problem. A lot of kids come to me after several of the sessions that we teach, and they say, you know what you said was bang on, like so important, and now we see it. We have kids who only towards the end of the program going, I wish I listened earlier on, because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to equip you so that you can be one of the smarter ones online, so that you can actually explore, potentially spend more time online and excel. Because as we move into the fourth industrial revolution now, around the world, you guys that are going to be 16, 17, 18, decisions are going to be made around just how savvy you are online. And yet we've spent most of our time in kind of mindless entertainment or whatever.
So how would, just you mentioned sort of people getting hacked and having people threatened and things like that. And how would someone like myself, who is always, I'm on many different social media platforms, because I mean, my sort of career that I want to go into depends on social media and my online presence. So how would I take sort of precautions to stop something like that happening to me or my friends or anything like that?
So I suppose the first, of course, to realize that this thing that we have, see it like it has doors and windows. And in your home, you probably put on your alarm at night, or you close your doors and windows. But a lot of people, when they have these devices, they leave things wide open. So their passwords are really easy, or they leave their security settings. They decide not to, for those that are not wanting to be, say, influencers or presenters, they leave themselves on public accounts. And so what happens is that means that you are going to get unwanted approaches. When you get those unwanted approaches, you need to understand that the net is largely driven either by ego, anger/pain, money, or influence. Okay, so essentially, a lot of people are having a really great time, but those that are trying to dupe you, they know the tricks. They know the psychological profile of people that are vulnerable. They know how to send you clickbait in order for you to give your email address, and they'll take a long time in order to pull you through a funnel and persuade you to then give away your credit card, as an example. Okay, so what you've got to do is you've got to open your eyes and realize that the device is actually quite a mature device, and that there's 4 billion people online, and that a lot of those people, they don't want to go to work. That what they want to do is they want to dupe people that aren't savvy, and they want to get their email address, they want to get sexual images of them, they want to be able to extort them, they want to be able to get them to give their credit card details in a bid to buy something. If you do, it doesn't mean that you need to be terrified. That's the thing, is you're going to go through your life and probably not experience that much of it. But the problem is if you think it's not out there, then you're mistaken, because anybody of any age from 10 to 70 is experiencing these issues. And so what you need to do is you're going to need to be aware of that. And then you're going to need to work out how much you lock up the doors and windows of your house, which means public or private accounts. It means whether you put in the different kind of security settings. Like, say, for example, in TikTok. In TikTok, there's a section called automatic downloads. That means that your video can be downloaded onto someone else's camera roll. Now, if somebody has your video, that means that they can play with it, they can edit it, they can post it, they can do whatever. Do you want that to happen? Like, in some senses, yes. But if you're not an influencer, then probably not. You want your circle of friends to see it. So there's some things that, while a lot of teens say they don't care, when you tell them, they then say, okay, I don't really like that. And it's about that awareness of really the world that we're in digitally.
So my question on that would be, so where's the line then, for example, with what you mentioned with TikTok, that you are, firstly, you're saying, what part of you is saying when you upload something, I am sharing this with the world, anyone has access to this? Because even if they can't download it, I mean, they can screen record it. There's ways that people can get that video once you put it online. So do you just sort of say, I'm accepting that whenever you post something, you think anyone can see this, I'm accepting this? Or do you try to find ways that you prevent people from seeing it?
It's a great question. I mean, and that's so true. That's the weird thing, is that now apps have workarounds for even the privacy and security settings. I mean, I saw that, I was just Googling how to hack screen time. So if somebody puts in, if you have a screen time, or if your parents have got the screen time function on the Apple phone, I mean, there's so many workarounds. But I mean, I suppose for me, how would I say it? I think what we need to realize is that what the information that we put out there, this is where my media side comes in, is you need to see them almost like digital tattoos. Most of the tattoos should just fade day after day after day. So you put something up and it's no big deal, and that tattoo only lasts, a day, and everybody looks at it and says that it's great. But if somebody wants to fool around with that tattoo, if somebody wants to republish that tattoo, it then becomes out of your control. So the moment that you send something to me and then I unshare it and then you delete it, it's still available inside the net and will be permanently available. And it may still have your account name or your tag or a hashtag or whatever it may be, that is a digital tattoo that may sit inside social search or inside Google. Google will index it if it's on a site, for example. So yeah, you're 100% right, to be honest with you, is that what you put out there most of the time just vanishes. It's yesterday's news. But if you put something out that is hateful, racial, if you put something out there that's private, if you violate somebody's privacy, and that happens to catch fire, that's a lot of digital tattoos. You will have seen it. You guys will have seen it with what happened with the bishop's teacher, right? Like when I go into schools and talk about that, like kids are just like, no way. Like people think that they're going to get away with stuff. And a lot of people do get away with stuff. But the more risks and the less awareness you have, the more likely it is that you are going to have an indelible digital tattoo out in the net. And that's tricky. And so you need to really go, yeah, I need to think about this. If you've got ambitions and hopes, there's a lot of kids who don't care. They say to me, "So we don't care." And I'm like, that's okay. That is going to be your decision. You will only learn, like I did, the hard way. When you really screw up is how we learn the quickest. But for somebody, interestingly, for somebody like you, when you're building a business or you're building like a media name, you definitely have to be more cautious. And I think this is the most important thing. Our organization, we go into schools and we teach 8 different 1-hour lessons. So we teach grade 4 and 5, then we teach grade 6 and 7, then 8 and 9, then 10 and 11. Okay, different types of content because of different maturity. But we actually have a brains trust of really clever psychologists, neuroscientists. We deal with sexologists about gender and preference and all that type of stuff. And we go in and we try and unpack like what's happening in teen life. And when we do that, we are able to really easily see um, what the expert advice is that we should be giving to kids and or to teens, and that has a lot of relevance. So it's not just like, safety settings or whatever, it's how your brain works. So for example, with you have to be extra cautious probably because you've got plans in the media. You do have a network and there is potential for virality around what you present. So you need to know your brain, that people might flame and troll and shame and try and egg you on and be jealous. That's the nature of the net. So we actually have to practice we need to notice how our brain responds and practice the ability to just switch it off. Because a lot of people react. They're very reactive about what happens online. And actually all you need to do is go, damn, what actually happens is something happens in your brain and body around this reaction. And you need to look at it and go, oh, look, I was being triggered. We call it being triggered. And you've got to be, and that's quite difficult in your teens because actually due to hormones and due to brain chemistry, it's actually really difficult to rein in your brain. It's much more difficult than it is for me. And I think that's quite fascinating. So that's worth you thinking about, certainly, because maybe you build up a following of 30,000, 50,000, you're going to find that the negative comments are going to be increased and you could either be defensive or antagonistic or aggressive, which is what happens. And that's when things go wrong.
So that's been an interesting thing for me because obviously I've been sort of considering this and thinking about different avenues to go down with what I want to do in my career. And do I want to be a sort of social media personality, or do I want to try and go into traditional film or whatever I want to do? And one of the big things is that I've had to just sort of come to terms with and accept for myself is that if I do want to pursue this online career, then I have to be prepared to have negative comments, to have people being hateful. But the thing is, you also do get the good comments and the positive comments. And I think that 99% of the time, you always have sort of a mix of both. So it is, I'm luckily not too subjected to that yet, but I think that at some point in the future, I definitely could be. So I've sort of said, well, I'm just going to accept this. And generally, I can sort of see where people are coming from. And if someone's just being hateful, you can see there's sort of some insecurity sometimes, or they don't agree with the same things that you agree. You sort of, they have different morals possibly to you and different things. So I think it's something that I've had to sort of just come to terms with and accept that if I do want to share stuff online, then that's going to be a big point for me, and something I have to consider.
Yeah.
And
Mainly because it's in the numbers. It's mainly because it's in the numbers. As numbers increases, negativity increases. And that's, again, to anybody that's listening, that's the interesting thing is that, as long as we know that, if I just explain that, then you can become less surprised about when there's negativity comes, because you go, oh, this is part and parcel of what I do. I'm going to need to be less shocked, less angered about it, because it is part and parcel. This is an endless journey online, that the more followers that you have, the more likely there are haters out there. And there's this famous Prince EA video on YouTube in which he says, people want to kind of give you this box. It's like a box of hate. Don't open it up. Don't open the box. And it's true. It's like, just let go. Just go, dude, that's not my gig at all. Because everybody is looking through the world. There's 7.5 billion people in the world, and every single person looks at their world through a different lens. It's impossible for us to look through the world through the same lens, because we all have different experiences. And so if we understand that some people have red lenses and are aggressive and are angry or whatever, and some people have green lenses and they can be a bit jealous. Some people can have really joyous lenses. I always say to the students, I say, think about people, look around you and go, how would I look at those people? For whatever reason, they have these different lenses, and those different lenses are the reason why people are saying the things that they are online.
That actually makes complete sense. I can definitely see where you're coming from with the different lens, and I think that also relates maybe to the way that other people are online and what they can post online. It's a different sort of concept, but I think it's the same thing, and it also depends on what you want to do online. So I sort of, when I was thinking about it earlier, came up with the sort of conclusion that you mainly get sort of three categories of social media users, primarily. I don't know if this is just sort of what I was thinking. Is from what I've seen is you get people that are use social media to just keep up with people and follow their friends and maybe go on once or twice. They don't post anything. They just want to be part of it. You get people that have personal accounts and they like sharing their photos and they just want to be able to share with their friends and connect with people. And then you get people who want to join sort of, I would say, the influencer space and create a business online. They want to promote their business online. And those are the sort of, I don't know if you would say there's probably more, but those are the three sort of primary.
Definitely. I think those are the three primary. But the most interesting aspect of that, which is really worth thinking about, is that in each group, imagine that there's everybody with these kind of different lenses, right? So, because this is it, you can have voyeurs, people that like to only watch. But what happens is some of them have got these kind of red lenses on. So they're just watching, but they're quite negative towards whatever you're posting, and they've got an opinion, and they come in and go, And then you've got people who are also kind of really joyous, and they come in and they just enjoy it. As you say, they're just happy about whatever you're doing. They say, man, that's cool, I love it. Or you've got people who are promoting stuff, and I see this in my world. You see people out there who are bringing their lens forward, and they're really negative. Like, go into Twitter, and you see people who are taking their lens, and they are slamming people. They are angry. They just don't want to look at anybody else's lens. And it's even the same with those in business. It's the same thing in work, even offline, not online. You see people who bring their stuff forward. And as soon as we understand the kind of inner workings of ourselves, that's when it becomes really fascinating on social media. Because you're right, there are those three groups, but the more interesting bit is how certain groups inside each group are operating, whether they're positive or negative. Because if we're talking about mental health, if we're talking about sexting, if we're talking about reputation, there are people that are going to try and trigger you, persuade you, cheat you, even if that's later on in life. We certainly see that kids are saying to us that, so we did a survey recently. When I say recently, this week, okay, and we sent a survey out to kids who were in lockdown. And we said to them, what would be the number one lesson you would want us to teach you after lockdown with everything that you've seen and experienced? 46%, I looked this morning, 46% said mental health, number one. Okay, so we offered them 8 things. We said privacy, security, and the second one that they asked for was support and focus. So they were saying this whole e-learning thing's basically, for some people, really frying their minds. Because, and that was at about 20%, because they were basically like, this is a lot, like there's a lot of screen time, there's a lot to deal with. I know lots of people are loving lockdown, so that's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying some people were like, yo, my head's blown. I'm on Netflix party, I'm doing TikTok, Insta, YouTube, whatever. You're on all of these devices, then you're learning, and then it's like, yo, I can't really get my head straight into getting my work done, for example. So, but it's so fascinating that mental health, of all the things that people could ask for, that they asked for mental health. It doesn't mean that they're all panicking or in anxiety. I think people acknowledge that they would quite like to have like a really strong and resilient and balanced mind, which goes way beyond social media or anything. It's just kind of cool to have a solid mind.
I think that it is definitely a topic that people, I think that if I were to ask some of my friends and go and do the same survey, I think you would probably find a similar result. And I think people just are looking for sort of guidance, especially, well, both online and offline, but they're looking for guidance in how to separate themselves possibly from what they see online, and how to spend time online, but also to take a break, because you are constantly stimulated when you're online. So it's tiring for your mind. I think it is definitely, it has a tiring element for you to be on your screen, because I also am been editing and doing online tutoring on Zoom. So that means I end up on my laptop from, now it's a bit later, we start at 9, but from 9 in the morning until sometimes 10 at night. And being on your screen the whole time, I find my eyes are tired. My mind is still very tired and not getting outside. You don't move around as much as you would if you're going from one meeting to another meeting. And it has a toll on you.
Yeah. And I think, so one of the guys we deal with is a guy called Dr. David Rosenstein. He's like a really amazing guy that specializes with people's anxieties, habits, but he's also a neuroscientist. So he literally plugs stuff into your brain and he checks stuff out. And, what I learned from him over the last couple of years of working with him was that we need to see ourselves as these very interesting kind of half chemistry lab and half operating system or kind of memory disk. Okay. And what I mean by that is that, as you say, is if we don't give the body the right chemicals through exercise, okay, so if we don't actually get certain things going in our body, it just kind of, for some people, can have like a bit of a natural kind of drag. You're just not as sprightly. Like literally, when you do the exercise, it turns on a couple of things that make you feel better. But by the same token, there's another aspect to it, which is non-physical, which is influence. Now, influence means that what you're looking through here, okay, as we look at stuff online, it's going through our eyes, through our ears, through what are called your cortices. Okay, so it actually just goes through here, processes at the back of your head, and then you store it. Now, that's also a different type of information that is being stored on your hard drive, your iOS 12, for example. And so those two things really impact what type of person you are in a day. Like, that's largely a fact. The other factor is really the influence of your family and your friends. But if you're doing exercise and if you're cautious about whether you've got negative or positive influence, or if you're turfing out, like pushing out negative influence, then you are going to protect and guard yourself to get yourself to whatever it is that you want to do much more accurately. So you are, and this is my whole thing, is that's why I don't need to lecture anybody, is you are in control of every choice you make. And most teams say to me, we just want to be in control. We want to make our own choices. And I'm like, dude, I am all for that. And mistakes will help you to make even better ones. But the main thing is you have to understand that if you don't exercise and if you put tons of negative stuff in your brain via your phone, then both of those things, you're going to be lucky if that doesn't affect you in some way, because essentially you're just a computer storing information that you get served. The entirety of America is a good example of that. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to be funny, but people are so interested in to what's happening between Donald Trump versus whatever, and that they are literally kind of like robots saying the same thing. It's really crazy. It's become very divided.
Being fed stuff through media, it just leads me to something that I wanted to touch on, which is something that I've found has been a challenge for me. And I think that there's a sense with social media, and you mentioned that the information that you see online, I have a big, strong feeling about that the information you see online is not always relative to what's necessarily true or real necessarily. And I think that often people can find, you can see problems in other people through social media because of what they're looking at, and they see people that are portraying themselves in a certain way, in a sort of perfect image of themselves, or a photoshopped image of what their reality actually is. And then when other people compare themselves, then they feel less than or unworthy. But it leads me to wanting to have my online presence as something that is very raw and real to who I am. But then it also leads me to question if I'm putting out raw content or myself very much, what part of that could then have a negative impact on me, because there's a part of me that wants to share a lot, as much as possible, and say, yes, I also have these problems, or this also happens, or I also do this. It's not like I only go around Cape Town with the Red Bull trucks and whatever else is in my content. But then I don't want to also show stuff that could have a negative impact on my brand and my image, because I'm very cautious of that.
It's a really difficult thing. And it's almost like once you get into bed with being somebody in the media or social media or an influencer or a creator, what happens is you are in a relationship or in a partnership with sometimes the positive and the negative, simply because of this concept of the lenses is that there's nothing you, Ollie, can do about that. If you decide to get out there, you have got into a partnership with people that have different lenses. The only thing that you can do, and I'm going to say this as well, and this is really important, is that people that have independent minds and people that are sometimes vulnerable, okay, out there, like they show the raw parts of themselves, that can be really rewarded. There's a whole lot of people that look at you silently or publicly and go, dude, respect. I wouldn't do that.
It leads me to also sometimes be concerned about some stuff because, for example, my social media is I'm very rigid with what I would be comfortable posting on my social media, because essentially for me, when I want to get a job with a client, what they look at is my social media. I send them my Instagram page primarily, and that's what they look at. So if you go on there, it's sometimes difficult because I don't post photos like necessarily with my mates unless I've done them in a very nice way that suits my style and would be beneficial. It's more about business for me with my social media. But what some people sometimes don't realize is that I put a lot of time trying to keep my image online a certain way. And the difficulty is that I've also found growing up in this sort of generation is that we don't necessarily have the luxury of privacy. So if you make a mistake or if you go to a party and someone's drunk or they're doing something they're not supposed to, you'll find someone taking a photo of you, taking a video of you, and maybe at the time you don't really think anything of it. And then, for example, this is just an example. It's my birthday tomorrow, and I'm actually nervous about that because last year I know that on my birthday it was sort of like disaster management control, and everyone's sort of every dumb thing I've ever done appearing all over the internet. So how do you manage that and control that part of things? Because I mean, I'm going to make mistakes and do dumb things, and I'll learn from them, but I don't necessarily want those things to go into social media. So does it mean I just am punished for all those mistakes, or is there a way I can avoid that?
I don't think there's that much of a way that one can avoid it. It's different in your age bracket than it is in mine because people are a bit more restrained about it. They feel either bad about it or they are conscious that maybe it could have an effect. But and I won't even speak out of turn that I know that it's like that in your age group. But I would imagine it's probably just funny and it's harmless fun and those types of things. But we don't account for the fact that maybe occasionally you're a bit uncomfortable about it because, not for any other reason than because you're thinking about clients and you don't want to be tagged and stuff. You know what I mean? And the answer to your question is that no, it's actually really difficult. You can't really do anything about it. And I think that's the difficulty is what? So you're not meant to have a laugh. You go to a party, you've got to be careful and look over your shoulder because maybe somebody's taking photographs. It's like, it's not on, but it's actually just a part of all of our lives now that actually, that is the way it works. And that also in culture, probably most of those people, when they post that stuff about your birthday, it's probably done with love and humor.
It is completely.
Yeah. And so in a way you kind of got to celebrate it and kind of relax, which I'm sure you are relaxed, but you know what I mean? You have to just let it flow. And hopefully if there's anything online that you don't dig that much, you can untag yourself or delete it or whatever, with respect to your professional, what you're trying to do from a work point of view. But Ollie, it's a tricky one. It's become, phones are literally just a complete addition or an addendum to our lives, and those photos and those texts and those tags, they come along with us. They're like our baggage of kit.
I think there's some cool tools that I've found to maybe help me, like with Instagram. You can change your settings so that you have to accept a photo if someone tags you. So I've been able to do that, and then I can say, okay, that's a good one for me to be tagged in, that's not a good one. But there's also, it's difficult because just the choice of, I don't necessarily feel that it would 100% affect me as much as it could possibly affect someone else going into wanting to go into a different sort of career field. I think the online space is pretty open, and they are mostly quite sort of understanding of past events. And if I'm trying to build a following online and someone sees that I did something dumb when I was like 17 at a party somewhere, they're probably not going to all unfollow me and say no. But I think there's a point where it could possibly have an impact on you if you are going to a job application and someone were to look at your social media and see someone like passed out lying on the grass or whatever the thing is, that someone else has taken a photo of them and then put it online. And it could have a negative effect on their job and their career without their consent.
It's very interesting that you say that, and I'm actually really glad that you asked that, because I think you're right. Look, in the media, it's very fluid. We in the media know that what social media is and what media is, and that there are waves, like positive and negative. But you're right. For some people, it's more difficult. I mean, we've seen in the US, that some kids that have put stuff out into the media had actually affected their varsity application because varsity administrators have been looking, right? But what happens there is there's a couple of opportunities for you as well. And that is that for those that are kind of going into grade 10, grade 11, particularly 11, they have an opportunity to be able to quickly clean up or sanitize their accounts. It's worthwhile checking, or to be able to potentially make them private for a period of time around varsity application. But most importantly, and this is one of the purposes of why we decided to chat, was that you have an opportunity to use tech and to use these devices to actually create what we call positive digital assets: a WordPress site, a Wix site, a LinkedIn student account, an Instagram profile that's got a lot of creativity, good art direction in it, great video and audio, whatever it may be. Those things you want to literally serve them under. You need to point all the things in terms of your application if you're trying to get into these great places, because that's the difference between great digital citizens and average digital citizens, is that great digital citizens totally get the whole game. They go, oh, cool, I'm going to have a great life, social media life. I'm going to use whatever applications and platforms that I want. But I'm also going to have another aspect to my life, which is that I want to show people that I really know how to use tech and smartphones. And I think, honestly, to give you credit, you do it really well. For your age, you do it super well. You're working on all sorts of this stuff. And if you pointed me to all of this stuff, I'd go like, I should hire this dude. And that's what a varsity administrator is going to go is, this guy's been working hard at this. And I think it's a really simple equation for teens, is that build that digital CV out and still have a great time. I always say to the kids, you've got two eyes. One eye should be on where you want to go, and one eye is on where you are as a teen. And that applies to, like, say, for example, somebody's being bullied. There's a group of people that want to bully someone, but if it doesn't suit you, which eye are you going to look from? Which eye are you going to work from? And again, it comes down to choices. So those that don't bother to build a digital CV and don't bother to point it to varsity administrators, they may be the people that lose out to people that are applying for exactly the same position. Other areas in which one needs to be really careful is around sexting, for example, because what we don't see is the fact that, if one shares a naked image or semi-naked image of somebody under the age of 18, then it's deemed to be child pornography by the Film and Publications Board. And of course, one would feel like, no, but that wouldn't get out there because that's something that's private between two people. But when you statistically look at how much sex are shared after the relationship ends, then you start to realize that, okay, hold on, the private sext is no longer private. It gets seen by a number of people. And as soon as it gets seen, it then becomes a contentious issue because somebody's violated someone's privacy. When it becomes a contentious issue, somebody then gets hurt. When they're hurt, what happens is the parents get involved and say, my son or my daughter was violated by somebody, or this situation happened, or whatever it may be. And then it becomes something about, well, your son or daughter shared a naked photograph, which was something that is illegal. And I think that's the thing that we don't realize, is because, what I try and explain to adults is that there's a whole load of reasons why people sext. It's the fact that because we're one generation away, a lot of us that didn't have phones look at it and go, I don't understand. But there's so many reasons why people sext. One is because it's an expression of your identity. It's a kind of a spark of rebellion in the same way that we used to drink or smoke or whatever it may be. And then it's about it's the fact that it's in our cultures. So a lot of flesh and a lot of showing of skin and sex tapes and what you can find on social media just with the right hashtag is unbelievable. And that, sexting is like, there's a very famous quote which says, sexting is not a gateway to sexual activity. It is sexual activity, which means it's just as exciting for many people to get a sex than it is to actually do something, which I know sounds crazy, but there's a lot of titillation, there's a lot of thrill in it, right? And so, there's a lot of other reasons. It's the fact that the prefrontal cortex of the brain is not developed until you're 25, not just 18, that actually you guys make incredibly impulsive decisions. You make quick decisions. You're hot on the button, okay? And the other one is that it might just be really funny, or there might be peer pressure. It could be two girls who say, hey, let's take a photograph on a Saturday and send it to boy, or vice versa. And there's like a trade. These can be very accidental. I don't think it's that everybody wants to be like really risky all the time. I think it's that they are common traps that teens can fall into. But the problem is they have this waiting, which can have you ashamed, feeling violated, get you into legal trouble and those types of things. And mainly what you need to know, you remember what I'd said originally, is that you need to start to understand the stats, that if you share a sext, there's a pretty good chance that somebody is going to share that, because the relationship normally doesn't last forever. And then it becomes, sexting is about sexual currency. It's like there's some kind of cool in it that people go, dude, like, check it out, look what I got. And then immediately there's that violation. And for humans, if we feel like someone violates our identity, you have like an identity inside you, like who you are. But if someone tries to violate it, it kind of breaks, it gets hurt or dented. And that's when people start to feel bad, because they look around and they say, well, how many people have seen my naked body? And have people been laughing? And, has this gone to 1,000 people? Or did it just go to 4? And these have got like big weightings on them. But you'd never know that they do unless it's happened to you. And those are the things that I just want people to know, because the choices that they make are theirs. So if you share those photographs, that's your choice. It's not for me to give you some big lecture. I just need to tell you that they do get shared. There are risks for your reputation and for your psychology if it goes wrong on you. And that's the same with the types of things that you say. If you say something which apparently deemed to be really funny, but it had a racial element, or it was something that, something like really hectic porn got shared. We've seen that in some schools, and it just goes so bad. It goes so wrong so quickly because of the virality. It's like everyone goes like, whoa, share, share, share. And then it's broken. It's like the horse is gone.
I think it's also something it's pretty like ingrained in sort of our culture, in the Western culture as well. And maybe what we have seen has become sort of almost normalized. So I think that maybe a lot of people at the time don't really necessarily think about it as much, or aren't as cautious as they maybe would be if there wasn't such a big distribution of sort of, not necessarily not from younger people, it's from older people, but there is a massive porn industry in the world. There is if you go onto Instagram, and the amount of people that are sort of showing off their bodies and semi-naked photos, which is, I guess, even a form of pornography online, is shown to us. And I think that kids experience from a very young age, possibly now, more than they have before. And to me, I don't know, it's always what you hear is like, don't watch porn, don't look at sexually explicit photos, don't do this. But what you also find is that people are somewhat subjected to that. Sometimes they're not intentionally, but 90% of people are going to be come into contact with some form of pornography or sexually explicit content online at some point in their childhood or teenage years.
I mean, that's the thing is, and sometimes there's been a lot of shame that's been pushed onto kids when they've stumbled into porn. Okay, I'm talking about at a younger age, and that doesn't help either. You know, the funny thing is that porn is out there, and if you're online, you're going to trip into it, and it just depends on what age you trip into it, and it depends. This is the most important aspect: is it depends what you interpret around it. What I mean by that is you don't want to make yourself wrong, because it wasn't your fault necessarily that it came into your sight. In fact, it might have been a choice. You might have gone looking for it. Whatever, you know what I mean? Like, humans are sexual beings, okay? So that is like part and parcel of it. The difficulty sometimes comes is when either somebody doesn't want it and then they feel guilt, shame, secrecy about it, because we don't realize that guilt and shame, they're heavy cloaks to carry, because people start to think thoughts. Why did I do that? You know, I didn't want to do that. You know, maybe it's against your values or your religion, or you start thinking about something to do with, you know, your family, or, you know, it's kind of crazy. The brain is very, very busy. And then you want to push it away. But, you know, what you don't want to do is you want to make it something that becomes something that is supported, something that somebody can explain to you, or that they can educate to you. So for people that have young siblings, not to kind of make them wrong about it, because I'm afraid it's just a part of life online. You're going to be presented quite a lot of pornography in your life as you get into your late teens and early 20s. And we see kids that are seeing it at 9, 10, 11 in some schools at the moment. We have girls. I had a girl in grade 4 that was being approached by a 35-year-old man, and, you know, sending a cell phone and wanting a date, knowing that she was 9 or 10. You know, it's part and parcel of the net. Not saying for one second that it's okay. So it's actually about what we do with it. It's actually about how we go, oh yeah, this, and that is really the thrust of what we're doing at My Social Life, is trying to say to you, yes, this, exactly as you say, this is part of the fabric of culture right now. But how do you interpret it? How does it make you feel? Are you allowing it to process through you? Are you, even if you like it? Like, who am I to say? We've got a whole module called Sexuality Online. Like, what are we being presented online? And how does it look, and how does it make us react? It's a freaking amazing module, because it's really fun. Like, you suddenly start to notice just how sexualized we are online. And that, you know, if we understand that, we can then decide if we want to dial it up or down, but we can be more conscious of our decisions. And really interestingly, that Sexuality Online module in some schools has been the most popular.
Well, I think it's probably one of the more interesting topics. As soon as someone brings up sex, everyone suddenly wakes up and they're interested and they want to hear about it. I think it's the same. It's why it's such a big industry in the world. I think it's something, yeah.
We also, you'll enjoy this. We also did this, we used a piece of technology, which was really cool, to do an anonymous question and answer session. So, because, you know, the difficulty is in the area, the thing that I teach is difficult. It's different to perhaps say maths. I don't know what it's like in maths, whether people are scared to put their hands up. But in my lesson, between grade 4 to 7, they want to talk all the time. But as soon as you get from grade 8 to 11, it's like, well, I'm not going to ask this guy any questions. So then, but what's really important is they have questions. They really do, because some people come and get me afterwards and so on. So we decided to do this anonymous Q&A via technology. So people could ask the questions that they wish that they could have asked during the program. And it went crazy, like amazing questions, hectic questions. And I had to kind of think on my feet. But it was interesting, because you see there, that's what I'm saying, is I brought technology into the equation to open the door between the two generations, you know. And I often say that to parents, like, don't knock TikTok or whatever it is that your kids are on. Try and understand why they're on it, why they like it. Use it as a bridge, have a discussion. You know, sure, they might be using it a lot, or it might irritate the hell out of you, but ultimately, you've got to have a discussion because it's a completely, massively integral part of their lives. And yet, so just you forcing it out the door is not really it's not going to get you any further. And that was proved when we used this Q&A mechanism. Suddenly it went bananas. It was a most fascinating session. You talked about raw questions came out. People wanted to understand everything around what was happening in other schools, what happened around the bishop's teacher. They wanted to find out everything. What happens if this? What happens if that? So there are these questions, they're out there. They just want you to make it safer for them to be able to ask.
And would you be able to maybe share like one or two of the questions that you thought were interesting, just to maybe touch on them?
I probably need to pull it up. It was last term. Let me just see if I can have a look. It was
because
cool.
If we can include maybe a little bit of that, I think it would be great, because essentially what we're trying to do is create a forum that people can sort of get their questions answered without having to ask them in the first place. So if there were maybe some that were repeated a few times, or...
Let me see if I can find it. It doesn't seem like I've got it here. I'm just trying to find it, but the problem is I can't remember my login code. Let me have a look here. Let's see. It may not be that difficult. No, I can't find it.
Okay. Well,
it's really good. Pity. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a pity,
Sorry.
but it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions. I mean, the types of questions are, for example, how do I approach a cyberbullying situation? Because, the problem is with cyberbullying that a lot of teachers and a lot of schools don't get is that the victimization or the bullying of the victim continues long after school. It just goes on. And, it's there when you wake up and you turn your phone on in the morning and so on. And they're like, okay, so you're asking me to try and report that, but nobody knows that when I go home, it then amplifies and dials up. Like, what is somebody going to do about it? And that is the difficulty. People actually need support. So at that point, you need to start to understand what is happening to you if you take repeated kind of bullying in your brain. And then you have to start to dial it up, whether you need to approach somebody for support or whether you're going to allow somebody to continually drag you down. But then there's a way in which you need to approach it. So often what one does is you can just say, you can go and tell the wrong person, first of all, is you've got to tell somebody that's safe, somebody that you trust. You've got to say to them, please don't bring this situation out in front of me. Don't haul us up together, you two, or call yourself into Mr. Gitlin's office or whatever. It can't happen like that because that's going to be like murder for you. So it needs to happen much more surreptitiously. You need to find somebody that you trust. Somebody needs to come and watch that situation. You need to gather evidence about what's happening with regards to screenshots, and then you can approach it. But ultimately, people need help, because once you start getting victimized, what happens is your brain starts telling you stories. I'm no good, people hate me. And that's the type of messaging that goes round and round. You don't need that in your life. And so these are the things that we need to try and show people.
Luckily have never really been subjected to that personally, but I think it is difficult because you don't want to a lot of people don't want to create a scene around it, or to make a big thing, but they are affected by it, and that's a smaller scale. And then, but I do sort of have a question, and it's a question that I've asked myself quite a few times also, is about on a bigger scale, when you are putting yourself out there on social media, when you are trying to build a career off social media, and then you do receive comments that are negative and hateful, a part of me says, and then people will be upset about it and say, I can't believe that someone would say this, but then a part of me says, well, you choosing to do this, and that that's part of this whole big package that's happening of what you're trying to do. It's part of your career that you are going to receive negative comments. So a part of me sort of says, like, do you really need to complain about this? You know that this is a part of what you've signed up for. But then obviously the other part of me obviously wants everyone to just not do that and just for everything to be positive. And well, yeah, it's fine if it's difficult for you, then you should share that. But it's been a battle, I think, an internal battle for me of, do you then say, I can't believe people would be mean when you're choosing to share it? Or do you say, this is just part of it, so I'm just going to accept it and carry on?
Also, a really cool question. It's actually a mixture of both. So, and then this is what's really important. It's the same thing that I'd said about porn, is that you're a human being, right? So you are going to experience emotions from the trigger. You're going to get triggered, okay? Because you're human. You're going to feel either hurt or angry. Like I'm more of an angry kind. Some people are more sad kind or disappointed or ashamed. You know, people, we have this kind of full sweet bag of emotions, and one just comes out and looks at us like that movie Inside Out. I mean, it's really true. It kind of triggers us. And different people respond differently. So for you, what happens is it depends how it makes you feel. But the most important thing is you kind of have to observe how you respond. You have to get to know, how does Ollie respond to this type of, let's call it stimulus or attack? And then you have to allow it. Okay, so it'll have to process to come through. Say, geez, I am really peed off about what happened here. I am fucking angry and whatever. The hard part is pressing pause on your action. So it comes through, because if you just bottle it, what will happen perhaps over time is you keep bottling your anger about people that are being kind of evil to you online. And then that bottling doesn't do you any good at all. That's where anxiety can come from, is because you're faking it. So you have to let the anger come through, but press pause on the action. Okay, so it passes through. So, and what you'll find is when you're able to do that, the response, your trigger, it dissipates or goes away very, very quickly, because you look at it and you start to go, yes, I'm livid. Freaking nail that person. And you watch it and go, okay, Heinemann, right, just calm down. And it kind of passes through, and you observe, you get so used to knowing how you respond that it allows you to let it pass, because you realize that tomorrow it was some dumbass comment in a feed, and you go, as I said, you start looking at it going, what is this dude's problem? Clearly those lenses are dark red, green. There's some problem for this person, okay, in their life. And that's their bag, ciao. But the problem is you can take it and it can start affecting you. So what you've got to do is look at it and go, okay, the first thing is someone's clearly got a problem here. I need to remember that tomorrow this issue will probably be gone. So I might as well just let this pass by. It comes through. It's the essence of meditation or mindfulness, you know, like the Headspace app, is that we need to let the thoughts pass through like clouds, that they actually go by, because otherwise we'd be triggered all day long. It is honestly a superpower tool of resilient people, is that you let stuff, you can dust yourself off, pick yourself back up and move on. And it is like really amazing. And that's why people meditate, is because our brains are so clouded. They talk about it. It's a little bit like a puppy that gets thrown a bone. So somebody, the bully or somebody that wants to intimidate you, throws a bone at you. And it depends whether you're a puppy or whether you're a mature staffy or whatever. It's that you don't go off and chase it. You just go, whatever, dude, like whatever. And that is what the brain normally does, is emotionally we go and react. And what you actually want to do is observe the reaction and say, and it's not easy. It's much harder in your teens. But honestly, that for you, it would be a very valuable tool, is to start to become this person that can really observe and watch it. And most importantly, know that, remember, what happened yesterday, you can hardly remember. You try and think back to yesterday. There's so many things. You have like 50,000 thoughts, and you can probably remember 20. And you can probably remember 10 highlights if that's it. So this stuff just goes into your past, and you have to let it go there. And that's one of the things we teach in resilience, is that you don't have to take everything so personally.
I think that's a great sort of point, and I think we've been going for quite a while, so I think I'm going to try wrap it up. But I think that's a brilliant sort of point to end on. Is just to learn to try and sort of dust yourself up and carry on moving forward, and to take and to choose what information we hold on to and what we don't hold on to, and to take criticism as criticism that is constructive, not to necessarily take on just hatefulness, to take on criticism that can help us grow, and to take on positivity, and to carry that positivity through with us into our day, into our week, into our lives, and to just carry on building on ourselves and learning rather than hanging on to negativity, which is something I've been working on a lot these past few months. And I think the more you do it, the more you can just be filled with gratitude and love, even for people that are sharing possibly negative things towards you, instead of just holding on to it and being angry or feeling disappointed in yourself. But
the thing is, I think that's really true. All I was going to say is that because you can't change them, you can only manage you. And so that is the bit that you can change, is if they've got negativity and you look at them and you go, oh, shame, not in a condescending way, but like, whoa, I wonder what's happening there. It allows you to actually, and this is what I was saying before, for you to get into the flow of Ollie Heinemann, whatever that is, creating, doing cool stuff, helping people, interviewing people, trying to share a message. Like, these are amazing things. And it allows you, because you're not carrying other people's baggage. And my parting point would just be this to anybody that may or may not have liked whatever we chatted about, because I get it, there'll be people that go, who's this dude, and this is not what I wanted to hear or whatever, was that the stuff that we're trying to teach is not so much about social media. Social media is the doorway through which we can try and teach. The things we're trying to teach are things that potentially may last you into your lifetime, which is about resilience and empathy and being somebody that's quite savvy about playing the game and having a good digital CV. And there's research that shows that students like lessons which may not just be about what's happening right now. They like life lessons. It depends how they're taught, of course, but they like really cool, like digital life skills is what we teach, because it's not stuck into the context of the classroom or the exams. It's about like, wow, it's about the brain and social media and digital and my potential and, how I protect my brain. And that's what I hope people get, that social media is really the top of the iceberg, but underneath it, it's about trying to look after yourself and your potential, because that's kind of really worth playing for. Otherwise, what else are we here for?
exactly that. It makes it a lot more exciting learning about something that you can carry through into your life than just learning about sort of a fact or something you can only take at that time. But thank you so much for joining me today, Dean. It's been an amazing chat. I think we could have carried on for a lot longer, but that's all we're going to get through today, and possibly we can touch on it again in the future. Just wanted to say thank you very much for joining and for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just taken a screenshot. I'll share it on my social channels, probably on LinkedIn most particularly. But thanks to you. And I think it's awesome what you're doing. And I hope that more folks like you do more of this stuff, because it's pretty cool.
Thank you very much, Dean. And I just want to say thanks to everyone for watching. And please just go down and subscribe if you can. And I will see you guys again next week. All the best. Signing out.